You're listening to the Jake Asman Show on the SportsMap Radio Network.
Presented by Rocket Mortgage.
Live from the O'Reilly Auto Parts Studios, here's Jake Asman.
The term might be totally off base, but for those that watched Carson last year and thought he looked broken, what's kind of your response to maybe the plan to unbreak him, again, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, well, you know me well enough to know that and that's a totally right. That's a good question. It's a fair statement, but yeah, I just cringe when I hear stuff like that. Not that a player shouldn't be accountable for poor play on the field, and Carson has to answer to that, and he has answered to it, and until you get out there and prove otherwise, that's what you live with. But I just know that playing the position of quarterback, there's so many factors that go into it.
That was the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts, Frank Reich, obviously talking about his new quarterback, Carson Wentz. And Reich yesterday went to bat for Wentz, which is what you would expect when you consider the fact that Wentz is only a Colt because Frank Reich wanted him, because Frank Reich had the relationship with him. And ultimately, when you look at the Indianapolis Colts this year, there's no excuse for them to not win the AFC South. That division is not great. In fact, you could argue it's one of the weakest divisions in the sport right now. Tennessee has been okay. They were a playoff team a year ago. They lost wild card weekend to the Ravens. The Texans are awful. The Jaguars stink. They won a single game last year. I'm sure they'll be better, but let's not hype up the Jaguars. There's no excuse for the Indianapolis Colts to not win the AFC South this season. And as good of a coach as people think Frank Reich is, at some point he does have to find his quarterback. Frank Reich's entering his fourth season. It's a big one for him. The Colts haven't won a division since 2014. And over the last 3 years, Frank Reich has obviously had a different starting quarterback in Andrew Luck, Jacoby Brissett, and last year, Phillip Rivers. At some point, you got to find your long-term solution at the position. And he basically convinced Chris Ballard, the Colts general manager, that Wentz is the guy. So Wentz better be the guy. Because I look at the Colts and I look at what they could have done this offseason, and me personally, I would have traded for Matt Stafford. I would not have let the Rams make the best offer. I know the Rams had Jared Goff, and maybe the Lions wanted that back in the deal so they could still have a quarterback in place. But you know what I would have done if I'm Indy? Make a better offer. Put the 21st overall pick in the draft and my one next year. Because that's how much better I think Stafford is than Wentz. Wentz is a major risk. If he's, 2017 Carson Wentz all over again with Reich, I stand corrected. But sometimes a guy could just be broken. I don't think Wentz will be as bad as he was last year. I mean, he was one of the worst quarterbacks we've seen in the NFL in a while last year. He averaged a woeful 6 yards an attempt. He had 15 interceptions, which led the league. I don't think he'll be that bad this year. But are we ever going to see the Carson Wentz of old? I'm still just not convinced. I understand Frank Reich's a good quarterbacks coach. He got a lot out of Phillip Rivers last year. He deserves credit for that. But, man, this better work, because if it doesn't, and you could have had Matt Stafford, that to me would have been the move to make. Have a guaranteed sure thing at the quarterback spot. He's only, 31, Matt Stafford? Could have been your guy for the long term. And when you think about the Colts in that division, roster-wise, they should win the division. The only thing that would stop them from winning that division would be if Carson Wentz, craps the bed for the second year in a row. And then you start to wonder, well, what is his career going to be? Is he done? But if I'm the Colts, I would have traded the 21st pick in the draft and a one next year and got it done. Because I think Stafford's that good. I think Stafford has been in a bad situation for most of his career. And if he got put in the right situation, a la Indy, the Colts would be a Super Bowl team. Now you're kind of waiting and seeing what they're going to be. I would have been more aggressive for Stafford. They chose to go with Wentz. Frank Reich is banking on Wentz being the guy that he remembers when they were together with the Eagles. Here's more from Frank Reich on why he pushed for a Carson Wentz trade.
You stick your neck out for players as a head coach or a GM or a scout or a coach. We all do it. Obviously, as a head coach, sometimes you have a little bit more say in it than maybe a position coach. But that's what you love about it. I mean, you have to – I love sticking my neck out for people I believe in. So, yeah, I'm willing to put it on the line for players. that you believe in. I believe in this team. I believe in Carson. So, yeah, I feel good about it. I do know that his play will reflect, the work that he does. It'll reflect the work our team does. It'll reflect the work that our staff does, all in preparation. So, but I don't mind being the point person on that.
He is staking his reputation on Wentz. If Wentz blows up in his face and the Colts have a bad season, Frank Reich's now on the hot seat. Someone's got to take the blame. Chris Ballard's been really smart. He hasn't been overly aggressive for any of these quarterbacks in the draft. He's kind of been just delaying it by just finding bridge guys the last couple of years. Brissett, after Luck obviously retired. Then they bring in Phillip Rivers, which works. But they have never found the guy that's actually going to take this team that has a good roster to a Super Bowl. And now if it doesn't work, Ballard's not going to get a lot of blame. It's going to be Reich. So really, Ballard has like the ultimate shield. You can just blame Frank Reich if it doesn't work. But if this blows up, he's the one that takes the blame here. Indy should win the AFC South. We're based here in Houston. I could tell you the Texans are awful. The Jaguars won a single game a year ago. Tennessee doesn't have a defense. Tennessee lost Corey Davis. Tennessee lost to Dory Jackson. I don't think the Titans are as good as they've been. I also know Derrick Henry, as great as he is as a running back, at some point, those guys don't last forever. At some point, Derrick Henry's going to have a regression. And then what will Ryan Tannehill be when that happens? What will Ryan Tannehill be when Arthur Smith is no longer his offensive coordinator? Like, there's no excuse for the Colts to not win the division. The only way they don't win the division is if Carson Wentz is just awful. Because I think talent-wise, Indy clearly has the best team in that division. So I think this is one of those moves where, like, if it blows up in Frank Reich's face, all of a sudden, we're talking about a coach that's on the hot seat here. But ultimately, Carson Wentz better play well. Because forget from just a Colts standpoint, we're going to start talking about Carson Wentz like he's one of the, the big busts we've seen in the NFL if he doesn't put it together here after what was just a terrible season. He's got to play better than what he did last year. That's obvious. He couldn't be any worse. But, like, what is Carson Wentz at this point? Does anyone know? See, the guy we saw even in 2019. I thought Wentz was pretty good. Remember the Eagles had all those injuries? Wentz rallied them in December. I think they went undefeated in the month of December. He threw for over 4,000 yards. He was throwing to, what's his name? The ex-Houston quarterback that was converted into a wide receiver at the end of the stretch run for the Eagles. And the Eagles got into the playoffs, and obviously Wentz got hurt in the playoff game on that dirty hit by Jadeveon Clowney, and that was really it for Wentz. He was never the same player. And that's the other question you have with that trade. Wentz maybe could be effective if he plays. Is he going to stay healthy for a full season? I don't know. I think it's real risky what the Colts did. I would have pushed for Matt Stafford. I know it would have cost more than what it cost to get Wentz, but you know what? At least I know what Matt Stafford is. The Rams gave up, their first round picks and obviously Goff. I would have traded pick 21 of my first next year if I could get Matt Stafford. That solves my quarterback position for at least the next 5 years. You add Matt Stafford to the AFC South, and we'll find out how good Trevor Lawrence is, but the Colts, at least for next year and probably the year after, have the best quarterback in the division. Now with Carson Wentz, you don't know. A lot of risk involved. Could I see the scenario where Wentz plays really well? Maybe he reverts back to what he was with the Eagles, at his height. I suppose it's not crazy, but I'm kind of banking on Wentz being somewhere in the middle there. He won't be as bad as he was last year, but will he be anywhere close to what he was during his MVP season of 2017 before the injury? I don't know. I lean with the answer of that being no. But one thing is for certain, Frank Reich is absolutely betting his career on Carson Wentz, this experiment. If it fails, he's on the hot seat. Because Chris Ballard could go to Jim Irsay, the owner, and say, look, he wanted He wanted Wentz. This wasn't my move. If the ship starts to sink, that's when the blame starts to be delved out, and Reich will have to wear that one. So no surprise, Reich came out yesterday and defended Wentz. But looking ahead, that's going to be one of the more fascinating storylines to watch in the upcoming NFL season. What are the Colts with Carson Wentz? That's the question I have for you. What are the Colts with Carson Wentz? 800-224-2004 is the number to get involved and weigh in on that very topic. Ron, let's bring you into the conversation here. What are the Colts with the 2021 version of Carson Wentz?
It's a wait and see right now. I got to see what he's going to do. If he's getting what the Eagles had last year, then the Colts are just like every other team in the AFC South. And we'll be looking at them as this year's NFC East, I believe. But if Frank Reich and Carson Wentz can have some of that magic they had back, 4 years ago, I think Colts are the clear-cut favorite out of the AFC South. May even potential for a deep run in the playoffs.
If Carson Wentz is elite, I think the Colts could go to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I think that's the type of talent they have.
I'm stopping short because, there is still that guy in KC who will have something to say about it because he's next level right now.
But I'll tell you, eventually the Chiefs will get beat before the Super Bowl.
No, they have to.
Eventually. They can't go to the Super Bowl every year, can they?
Well, the Patriots couldn't, and they had the best guy at the position and the best coach at the position. So,
and even they got beat a couple times.
They had to.
You look at the Colts offense, there's no excuse for Wentz to not play well.
No.
Jonathan Taylor, Marlon Mack, Naeem Hines. You got 3 running backs that all could play. T.Y. Hilton, Michael Pittman Jr., Paris Campbell, your top 3 receivers. Jack Doyle and Mo Alley Cox, your 2 tight ends. Obviously, their offensive line is still very good, led by Quentin Nelson up front. Defensively, you're talking about a defense that has Darius Leonard on it, DeForest Buckner. They drafted the kid Pay from Michigan, who's really good in the first round. Zaire Franklin is still playing linebacker, one of the more underrated players in the league on that defense. Like, this team is good. This team should go out there and win the AFC South. I think Tennessee, even though they won 11 games a year ago, is not as good as they've been. Houston is certainly worse than they were last year, and they were bad last year. And Jacksonville might be better. It can't be any worse than 1-15. This should still be a division the Colts win.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way Trevor Lawrence is going to have that much luck his first year or bring. What do we talk about, or what do we joke about, that he's set to lose his first football game ever? Yeah, and he's going to
regular season game.
Isn't that amazing? His first regular season game ever. He's going to, and he's going to. There's no way the Colts go 17-0, right? God, it's going to mess me up all the year. 17-0, right out the gate. So that they're going to lose, and they're going to take their licks. I think they're going to be better than a 1-win team. I think they're guaranteed 2 in their own division.
Look, if Jacksonville goes out there and they win, I think 5 games, I think you would take that.
Oh, yeah.
I think that would be successful.
Well, let's see. You guarantee 2, right? Against the Texans.
you would think.
So
the Texans might be looking at it like, we better win the Jaguar game week 1, otherwise we might not get another win anytime soon.
Hey, if they don't have Deshaun Watson and they're starting Taylor or
Davis Mills.
Yeah, Davis Mills. I was about to say Kyle Trask, but that's right. They drafted Davis Mills. If one of those 2 are starting, my money's on Jacksonville and Trevor.
I'll just tell you what. If the Colts do not get it done this year, we seriously have to question Frank Reich, because if they don't get it done, to me, that is a sign of something went incredibly wrong with Carson Wentz. Because talent-wise, I don't think it's close. Indy's clearly the most talented team in that division right now.
Then I think Frank Reich's the right guy to fix him. I'm not saying, Frank Reich said, I don't know if he's broken, but he definitely didn't have it in Philly. And it showed when Frank Reich left that Carson started that slow decline.
800-224-2004 if you want to weigh in on the phones. Will Carson Wentz work with the Colts? How good will the Colts be in 2021? Your reaction to that and much more with the NFL. We'll get back to the NFL coming up later in the show. But tonight, NBA play-in tournament. I can't say playoffs, but it is the postseason. Technically, it's not the playoffs, though. You get what I'm saying?
It's the first 4.
The first 4. Let's call it that. The 10 versus 9 in the East, Charlotte and Indiana, and the 8 versus 7, Washington and Boston. We'll talk about both those games coming up next right here on the Jake Asman Show.
Hey, sports fans, Jake Asman of Sports Map Radio here, and